right. Welcome back to the Retire Stronger podcast, episode 5. And I'm here today with my co-host, Bill Kearney.
John, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Hope you are.
I
Glad
am,
to be
John.
back with you. Today, Bill, we're going to talk about sequence of return risk.
I think
And
you need to hold on, let the applause die down. There's a lot of applause out there from people excited to talk about sequence of return risk, John. Just give it a minute, let it breathe.
absolutely, it's going to be an exhilarating topic today. So many folks that are listening to this may not even know what sequence of return risk is. So I'll just give a quick introduction to what this type of risk is and how it can impact your portfolio, your retirement income strategy over time. Because it could have positive impacts, it could have negative impacts, but the risk that we're going to talk about today is going to focus primarily on the potential negative impact on your overall retirement and retirement income planning strategy. And so, sequence of return risk, Bill, it is basically where early on in your retirement income strategy, when you retire, start taking income, what we're referring to here is, at what point in time, during retirement, the potential for negative return years or down years in the market that can have a negative impact on your portfolio, which can have a very serious impact on, the potential for you outliving your money. So that's really what we're talking about here, and we're going to discuss those implications. We're gonna kind of break down what sequence of return risk is, and we're going to give kind of a I don't know a case study or an illustrative example, which will be in the show notes if you want to go to our website and see a hard copy of what we're going to talk about today. And, we're going to talk about the different factors that can increase this risk or decrease this risk. And also, we're going to discuss strategies on how to manage sequence of return risk. So, Bill, if you want, why don't you kick us off and let's get this discussion going.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as a backdrop here of what we're talking about, when we talk about retirement risks, um, we're talking about things that are financially related to a person's portfolio. But at the same time, we're also talking about things that have an emotional connection to that portfolio or to what's happening in that person's world. And sequence of return risk is no different. We have done previous episodes. One of them was on longevity risk, which is the fear of outliving your money. One of the methods in which longevity risk can really come into play is sequence of return risk. And as
Absolutely.
John mentioned earlier, sequence of return risk is not about the average rate of return on your portfolio, but it's about the order in which positive and negative returns occur on your portfolio. And so today we're going to walk through an example of that to show you how that can play out in someone's portfolio. But essentially, if an investor experiences negative returns early in retirement, while they're also withdrawing funds from their portfolio can be significantly depleted, maybe much more quickly than they expected. And this is the type of risk that, if not dealt with or discussed up front at the very beginning of an income planning session, it could happen to you without you actually realizing it. And it sends you into essentially a financial death spiral. I hate to be so morbid about it, but that's essentially what can happen. And our goal today is to just bring to light what this is, so that if you don't understand it, you'll go talk to your financial advisor and say, hey, I heard about this thing called sequence of return risk. Am I protected from it, or am I exposed to it? And what do I need to do? Right.
Yep. And how are you helping me navigate it as well? So many folks that come into our office, you know, they they are expressing concerns about the very risk we're talking about, but don't really understand what the risk is or how to articulate it in this manner. And I think one of their biggest, I don't know if I use the word complaint or concern with how their strategy is progressing is not understanding how to, you know, address, the impact on their portfolio long term. And there are certainly ways we can do that. And I think we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an example of sequence of return risk that is actually going to be in our show notes under this episode, so you can study it a little bit further. And I'm going to take a few minutes here just to walk you through the concept. And this visual, if you find that down in the show notes later, will be helpful as well. But uh, let's take an example of two couples. We'll call them couple A and couple B. Okay. Both of these couples are age 65. Both of them start with $500,000 in their retirement portfolio. Both of them average a 6% net return on that portfolio. And both of them are withdrawing 5% from the portfolio over 30 years. Okay, so all of the initial, those four critical pieces for our examination are exactly the same between these two couples. Now, what we did in our example is we reflected positive returns for couple B, positive returns for about the first 5 or 6 years of their retirement. And we took the sequence of the returns on couple B's portfolio and we flipped them so that couple A is now experiencing negative returns early in their portfolio. For example, the first couple has a negative 27.1% return in year one on the portfolio, and then a negative 16.5%. When you study this piece later on, you'll see if you go down to the end of the sequence for couple B, you'll see the exact same numbers. We just took the sequence of returns and flipped them around. And when we did that, the results were stunning. Essentially, couple A, drawing that 5% out of that portfolio, is out of money by year 13. They're 78 years old. Okay. By year 13, they are out of money in their retirement account. Essentially, at that point, they're having to come up with some alternatives in how they're going to fund their retirement. Pretty drastic. Couple B, because they had the positive returns early in their retirement, at the end of our analysis period, which was 30 years, they're now 95 years old. They started with $500,000. They've drawn out that 5% over 30 years. They still have $980,000 left over in their portfolio. Folks, that is the impact and the power of sequence of return on your portfolio. Everyone focuses so much on what is my average return? What is my average return? What's my rate of return every year? And those things are important, right?
Yeah, it
But
is.
sequence of return is critically important as well as far as planning your income. John, pick it up from there and just shed a little bit more light on that.
Absolutely. This is a topic that we talk about probably more often than anything else, which is, what are my returns? What are your returns? How did you do last year? How are you doing this year? What did our portfolio return? Um, it really, it's so much more than that, especially when you get into retirement and you're starting to do a withdrawal plan of your assets to supplement your retirement income. It's so much more than what your returns are, and it has more so to do with um, how your portfolio is performing during down years, which has a massive impact on your sequence of return risks. Um, I'm going to kind of put it in a different way a little bit here and kind of illustrate the fact of a little bit further of what we're talking about. When you run different analysis on your portfolio and you look at how the portfolio is going to perform long term when you start taking withdrawals, and in our example, we're averaging a 6% return, taking a 5% withdrawal rate over time. I think what a lot of folks don't understand is, hey, my portfolio looks like it's going to do well based on long-term projections with taking out that 5%. But what they don't understand is if we have a negative 12% year in the market and your portfolio sustains a negative 12% due to market performance, what they don't really think about a lot of times is if you're also taking out 5% in income, your portfolio is going to lose more than 17% that year because you're withdrawing funds at the same time that the market is going down. And that's why sequence of return risk is so important to understand as an investor, as a retiree taking income off your portfolio. That's why when these down years happen, that's why it matters so much how you are structuring your portfolio. And I'm going to take a little quick sidebar here, Bill, and say that structuring a portfolio, how you structure it, and how it is designed is way more important than just trying to build a portfolio based on, previous year's best performing ETFs or best performing stocks. Structure means more in the long run than just about anything does. And as long as you're structured properly, we can show you plenty of examples of how average returns really don't matter long term. It matters how much you're withdrawing, what the market's doing over time, and how that's going to play out with the longevity of your assets, during retirement when you're taking withdrawals. Um, so yeah, it's and it also, I know that, I believe, Bill, you're going to talk a little bit more about this, but it also goes to the fact that a lot of clients don't understand the fact that there might be a need for you to make adjustments to the amount of money you're withdrawing during retirement. And I think that people need to understand that. You know, I can't count how many times folks have said, I have to have X number of dollars per year to be able to live the way I want to live in retirement. But the fact of the matter is, there may be times when you have to make adjustments to your portfolio distributions due to specific, you know, market climates that we're in or economic cycles that we're in, if things aren't going the way that you want them to go, especially if that market return risk scenario plays out early on in the scenario of during your retirement. Sorry, I didn't mean to get on a tangent, Bill, but I wanted to kind of put that out there because I think it's important for people to understand that.
No, 100%. I mean, there's a number of different things that you would have to do if this happens, right? Like a lot of advisors use these percent rules on withdrawal from an account, right? First, it was the 6% rule, and then it was the 5% rule. And I think now it's the 4% rule, or maybe the 3.5 or 2%, because none of that's working, right? So,
Yeah.
so let's just stick with the 4% rule. Well, in our example, if couple A realize that, hey, we're having negative returns and we're taking money out, well, one of the first things they're probably going to think about is, do I need to adjust that withdrawal rate? Does that need to go down to 3% or 2.5%? And obviously, in this example, we didn't do that. We just had them continue taking the same amount out, and now they're out of money at in 13 years. And the critical component to this is you have to think about, how would you feel if this was you? If you saw those accounts dwindling much quicker than you expected, or maybe much quicker than you originally planned for, you're probably going to be pretty angry at the person maybe that was helping you with this. But then after that's done, you've got to think about what you're going to do. I mean, are you going to move in with your children? Are you going to be on government assistance? These are all things that somebody in this example with a $500,000 portfolio or a $1 million portfolio, we could run the examples that they're going to be thinking about. It's the emotional part of this
Yeah.
that
Well,
is
now that
complete
you brought that
upheaval for
up,
them.
absolutely. And now that you brought that up, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what ways do we help combat this risk? How do we run examples? How do we do analysis on this? What are the things that we're doing in our planning process and our strategies that are helping our clients help navigate this as successfully as possible?
Yeah, I would say there's a number of strategies that you need to look at with your advisor, and make sure that some or all of these are being utilized. You can adjust your withdrawal strategy, like we just said. Perhaps a little bit more diversification in your portfolio, right? Maybe if you own all of the S&P 500 in your retirement, that volatility level is going to be a little bit too much, might expose you to more sequence of return risk than necessary. Um, there are bucket strategies you can use where you partition money based on, now, soon, and later, for example, and you invest
Yep.
things differently based on when you're going to need funds. Maybe you build a bit more of a cash buffer. Uh, I know that in our practice, we have used zero floor annuities, index annuities, as a diversification tool, sometimes as a bond replacement, even in a portfolio,
Yeah.
just
Well,
because of
let's.
what we've seen in bonds in the last few years. So there's a number of different options that are out there. The key to this is, are you exploring them, right?
Yeah,
And do
it
you
goes
have
back
any
to
of
my
these?
structure comment. It goes back to my structure comment. It's how you structure your portfolio for the long term. And it's not just stocks and bonds. And we can get into that in a completely different episode, but so many folks thinks that they think that bonds are um, a negative correlation to stocks. And the reality is, if you look over the last 100 years, bonds have been more correlated with stocks than in times where they haven't been correlated. So again, that your entire little section there that you just discussed is directly related to and in tandem with my comment on structure of your portfolio. And you mentioned using annuities. We don't necessarily recommend annuities for everyone. Annuities have to be the right fit for the right reasons. And typically when we would use an annuity would be when someone absolutely has a specific need for a guaranteed amount of income during retirement. And I just use the word guaranteed. That is kind of an ugly word in our industry. And if we can again, we could use a whole nother episode to talk about annuities and how they work and how they guarantee their income payments. But
That's a good
we'll
show
sit.
topic idea there, John. I think you
Yeah,
just came up with one.
great
Yeah.
show topic idea. So we'll definitely put that on the list of things we want to talk about. But again, it just comes back to how we structure things and understanding how they're going to work and understanding the pitfalls of where you could run into trouble and making sure that you in the best way possible, because there's no way to avoid 100% any of these risks that we talk about on our show, but it's about preparing for them, and it's about understanding and having a proper expectation around what it can do and how it can impact your long-term income goals.
Yeah, exactly. And I think from here it's a question of, well, what do I do? Okay, I kind of understand the sequence of return thing. I don't maybe not fully understand it, but I do. What would I do next? I think the very first thing somebody should do if they're not sure what their exposure is to this particular risk, you need to contact your advisor and schedule a meeting. And by the way, if you don't have an advisor and you're interested in learning more and you want to talk to me or John, you can certainly do that. You can visit our website, crownadvisorgroup.com, and schedule some time to do that. But if you have an advisor, we'd recommend you go talk to that person first. Have them run a Monte Carlo simulation that will do sequence of return for you, and it will be able to show you what your exposure level is to sequence of return immediately. And then from there, you can start to determine, what you want to do as far as mitigating that, right? What do I need to do to make changes in my portfolio to mitigate that type of thing? That's the very first thing you should do. And this is one of those things where you shouldn't put this off, right? This is something that you really do need to make sure you check out the exposure that you are experiencing in the portfolio.
I could not agree more. Um, yeah. So, I mean, I think that's what next steps for people that are listening to this episode who are concerned about this need to do. Go talk to your advisor. If you don't have an advisor, find one. If you don't know who to call us. If you don't know what to do, the best thing you can do is educate yourself, and we're happy to help with that. Uh, I mean, at this point, I think we've pretty much covered everything we want to talk about with respect to sequence of return risk. Is there anything else we should add in before we sign off for today?
No, other than just take a look at the example we put down in the show notes. I think it'll really kind of bring it home exactly what this looks like in reality. And as you said, John, we're here to assist if needed, but we certainly want people to ultimately have the peace of mind that they're seeking in their retirement planning, and eliminating or maybe just minimizing the exposure to sequence of return risk is a great start.
Yep, absolutely. And just to be clear, you can find our show notes on our website at crownadvisorgroup.com. Click on the link for our podcast and find episode 5, and you should be able to see our show notes and anything that'll be included there as well. Bill, I think this has been a great episode. Thank you for your time and being on with me today.
Great to be with you, John, and look forward to our next adventure.
Absolutely. Talk soon.